Hi, everyone. So nice to see you. I'm going to start this talk by sharing stories with you. And the very first story is something that's about to happen very soon, in a couple of months. June is a very interesting month in Sweden. It's a phenomena, if you ask me. It's the month when students sit in trucks, in cars, in bicycles, honking, screaming out the window, celebrating for their life. I don't know about you, but I remember sitting on a truck, to be specific, and I was so confused and actually so scared. Because I couldn't stop thinking about what's going to happen next. What was this it? Sitting in a truck and screaming, was that all there is? One of the reasons I was worried and scared wasn't just because many of my student peers and friends were worried and talked about it. It actually had to do with the narrative that I hadn't really looked deeper into. And it's the narrative of not for people like me. When I went to my student's counselor, I was 14 years old. I told her my dream was to become a doctor, or I wanted to save lives, really. So when I went to her, she told me, that's not for people like you. And I didn't understand what she meant. So what I did was I lift up the phone and I called Karolinska Universitetssjukhuset, which is just a few meters away. This was not part of my plan to tell you this story, but I have to be honest here. When it comes to narratives like that you don't fully understand, it does get translated over the years, and it does catch up to you. I called Karolinska, and they saved not only my life, but tens of thousands of lives that I've been able to touch ever since. Because guess what? The student counselor said no, but Karolinska said yes, and I got the internship at the age of 14. But you know, what happened entering into the hospital was there was nothing that wasn't connected to technology. So my first thought was, I can't even register at the reception without being connected to technology. So, of course, the connection and connecting the dots occurred. Let me tell you something else. When I was sitting on a bus around that age, as a 14-year-old, 20-year-old, practically my whole life, living in Tensta, traveling to Kista, there wasn't much for us to do at that age. So we would go to hang out. And when I was sitting in a bus, traveling through Rinkeby, I would look out the window, and as a 14-year-old, there wasn't much happening in Kista, but I could feel the pulse. I could feel that something was coming. There was one building that looked amazing, like this one, and another one, and it just popped up more and more buildings as the years went by. Every time I was sitting on that bus, I would look out the window and then I would look at my surroundings. And I don't know why, but I kept saying no to myself. I said to myself, whatever's going on over there is not for people like me. And this is so important because there's data saying that 90% of the world's jobs will be tech related. The Economic World Forum has predicted that 85 million new jobs are being generated and created and even deferred. 97 million new skills are required. And a lot of this communication is being told, it's being shared in a very ambitious way. But young people don't really understand what that means. Because here you are, you're sitting on a truck and you're screaming and you're expected to do something with your life. But if you don't see yourself represented, then what will you become? Until this day, I still don't see in this country people that look like me in roles of CEOs or boardrooms, doctors, teachers. And if I would, by a raise of hand, if I would ask you if you've met a person that looks like myself in a manager role, I'm not going to put you through that because statistically, 1% in leadership roles in Sweden have a different ethnic background being a woman. Less than 1%. It's not about what you look like always. It's not about what I look like. The point is, it has to be relatable. Do I see myself in the future? Because 90% of the world's jobs will be tech related, it means that the majority of jobs and opportunities will be tech related. That is the future. Do you see yourself as part of the future? I'm gonna ask you to join me in this conversation, just to give you a little bit more information. I'm gonna walk you through the bridges that we need to build. And we're bridging the gap. You've heard those words before. But on what basis and what pillars are your bridges based on? Many of us that are in social entrepreneurship keep using words like bridging the gap and bridging, bridges, etc., building bridges rather. But you have to understand the pillars. But there are 4 limitations that we actually don't need. On this side, let's say we have the industries, because tech is not just one industry anymore. It's very much infused into every single industry, no matter if it's fashion or music, if it's artificial intelligence, quantum physics, but it can also be events. And the way we relate to each other and build relationships with each other, it's very much connected to technology, isn't it? So on this side, we have the industries saying, we have the job for you. We are looking for millions and millions of people, right? In Sweden alone, 18,000 talents are missing on a yearly basis until the year of 2028. It's estimated by Tech Sweden. If you zoom out of Sweden, over 500,000 jobs are missing, or 500,000 talents are missing. You zoom out of Europe, there are millions of talents that are missing. So we have a scarcity of talents, but the people aren't missing. We're screaming and telling people, come and join and develop, get a job here, become an entrepreneur, become more than just a consumer. You can be part of the team to produce. You can be part of the entrepreneurship journey. You can become a politician even, and so much more that has to do with the society. And on this side, we have young people, which is the majority in the world right now. There are women, they're young, and they have a different ethnic background. The median age in Africa right now is 19. That should tell you something about the world we're living in right now. The median age in Africa is 19. In the most strategic countries, we have over 75% of the population are under the age of 25. But the same and similar demographics exist even in countries like Sweden. So for me as a girl from Tensta, It's called a socially, economically disadvantaged area. So the area is disadvantaged, but the people aren't. The area says nothing about the people. Here, they are listening to the message and they're saying, "Nah, not for people like me." And usually, why they say no is connected to other people. It's not a blame, it's not a shame game. It's not you told me this and that's why. That's not always how it happens. It actually comes from within sometimes. You saying no to yourself before anyone else says it. And then in between, we have something called a bridge that needs to be built. And the pillars are exactly what I wanted to share with you now. One of the most important pillars is a role model. For me, sitting on a bus, traveling from Tensta through Kista, and ending up in a space where I would look outside myself and see the opportunities, I never saw anyone that looked like myself, that was within a field that I was interested in. My father came to Sweden, and the story that I usually tell is it's a joke, but there's much truth in it. So my father came to Sweden 10 years before I was born, and he deliberately chose Sweden. But the joke I used to tell, and still do, is that he heard the wrong country, he heard Switzerland, and ended up in Umeå. So he came as an engineer, and my mother, she works in the finance area. She's the eldest of 12 siblings. My grandmother, she has stored in her heart and in her memory 13 generations of stories. Not just you, your partner, and your children's names. No, no, no. For 13 generations, she has stored why you chose that partner and why the partner chose you. Where you were buried, what you meant for the society, what you left behind. 13 generations. So when I was sitting on that truck and yelling and screaming and not knowing where to go, I went to my dad. I asked him, "What should I do now?" And he said, "If you don't know where you're going, go back to where you come from." And I was like, "But I'm born in Sweden. Where do I go?" The only thing I could understand from that message was to go back and sit at the feet of my grandmother and ask her to share some of the stories she had for me. At first, she said no. 3 times, actually. She said, "No, you're not ready yet. Go home. Come back tomorrow." And finally, she shared it, and I started to write it down. When I got back to Sweden, oh boy, I was so inspired and even more confused. Because how do you now carry all those generations and make them proud? The thing about sitting on a bus, again, and traveling and looking outside the window and saying no to yourself because you don't see any representation is super important to talk about, because what we do talk about is idols, people that are unreachable, the people that we follow and that perhaps not always follow you back, right? There's another element to this bridge, which is called network. If your father, Baba in Arabic means father. If your father does not have access to network, then where do you go? Or your mother. If you go to your parents, to a person in authority, asking them to open up a door, and they want to, but they don't have access, So what do you do? Network is not just about showing up at an event and registering at events. Network is actually, it starts with one. There was probably one person who opened up the very first door for you. There was probably one person that made sure that even though you have all this knowledge, but you might not have enough competence. Because competence and the difference between that and knowledge is that you can be heavy on the scale of knowledge, but still have no competence at all. And this is something that is frequent. And one of the reasons that many young people feel a panic in summer, not knowing what the next step is, because here they are. They've studied, they have knowledge, but many of us don't have the competence that goes with it. And here's the wonderful thing about competence. We only need one person that says, I see you. Why don't you come and practice your knowledge with us? And on the next step, the next door will open. And thankfully, that's how you will build a CV. And now you're thinking, but we won't be dealing with CVs in the future because of technology and AI and all that stuff. But there is something called experience and track record, even for the people that are looking for talents. They want to know, what have you done? What experience do you have? What is your track record? And competence is one of the fundaments, right? To go from saying, no, this is not for people like me, into saying, yes, this is for people like me. We have a lot of people studying for years on end. And I do think that we have to make sure that education is available for everyone, everywhere. But in this time that we're living in, there's more to it. There's more to than just registering, studying. There's so much more to it for you to actually get the job or get the life that you are looking forward to having. Many of the students that I work with, it looks around like this. They would register to our courses, and there's a survey that I love data. I love to look at what is happening throughout the journey, what happens to the individuals that we are interacting with. And one of the questions that I look extra into is, do you see yourself as part of tech? 100% of the students that register before attending the course say no. They've registered, so that's a good thing. They're interested. But if you say no, then something has to happen. We have to do something for the doors to open up for you. 100% says no in the beginning. In the middle of the course, when there's 50% left, it goes from 100% saying no to 100% saying yes. And the fantastic thing about saying yes to yourself is that you now believe that you're worthy of a better life. There's another event I work with called Brilliant Minds, and what I'm so proud of, I'm so proud about being part of that journey, because we get to witness how young people go from, no, this is not for people like me, to yes, this is definitely for people like me, within 3 hours. Not 3 years, not 30 years, 3 hours. And that's exactly the kind of futuristic or transformational leadership that we need. The leader, the CEO for Brilliant Minds, she calls this a plus one concept. So the plus one concept is basically that you can bring people from your own community and they can get inspired by the event. So we've brought hundreds of plus ones every single year. And this also is something that happens in June. Not all of them have recently completed their gymnasium or secondary high school, because some of them are younger than that, they're about to finish, and some have finished many, many years ago. So the age range is quite wide. It's 18 to 30 usually. And sometimes we take in younger people than that. So what happens then when you start believing that you're worthy of a better life? I want us to be the last generation to ever experience these 4 limitations. Not having a role model, not having a network, not having the competence that you need to get into the door, not believing that you're worthy of a better life. Those 4 limitations, we don't need them anymore. And here is where you are not only introduced to this topic, but you're part of the solution. I want you to turn to a friend, the person that sits close to you, and tell them, you are, say after me, you are the role model, you are the network, you are the competence, you are the reason that someone else believes that they're worthy of a better life. Thank you.